Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast, the podcast all about the delicate balance between people and business, and quite literally, reconnecting the two. My name is Tracy Rubin, and I've spent nearly my entire professional career in HR. Join me as I share stories, opinions, and words of advice with you each week. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Thanks for being here for another week. You know the drill. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you are listening to this podcast. I have a really neat guest on for you this week. Her name is Karen Mangia. She is actually a Wall Street Journal best-selling author, and she's written a number of books. Her newest book is titled Success from Anywhere: Create Your Own Future of Work from the Inside Out. So let me tell you a little bit about Karen. She is currently the Vice President of Customer and Market Insights at Salesforce, where she engages current and future customers around the world to discover new ways of creating success and growth together. She leads the company's work from home task force and is shaping the strategy for the workplace of the future globally. And she is also passionate about diversity and inclusion. She serves on Salesforce's Racial Equality and Justice Task Force. Prior to Salesforce, she spearheaded customer experience at Cisco Systems. So she is super strategic and passionate, and of course, super recognized as well. She's been awarded the Centurion Award. She's a Hall of Fame honoree and a graduate of distinction from Ball State University. She's part of the 40 Under 40 in the Indianapolis Business Journal and Ivy Tech Distinguished Alumni Award winner. She's also, interestingly enough, a trained chef and is also active in numerous community organizations as a volunteer and a board member. So we're talking about a well-rounded, comprehensive guest today. And also, I think it's worth mentioning that she is a TEDx speaker. She's a prolific blogger and a sought-after person in this world of podcasting and media, where she's been featured in Forbes and regularly contributes to Thrive Global, Authority Magazine, and ZDNet. I'm really excited for you to hear this episode with Karen, and I think it's going to be an amazing discussion with some equally amazing takeaways for you. So without further ado, here's my interview with Karen. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and share this episode. Thanks so much for listening, and let's get right into the interview. Karen, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Well, thanks so much for having me. And I think you and I share a passion for building community. And when I look in every direction of my life, whether that's where I live, where I work, with whom I have the opportunity to collaborate, or who I'm listening to in our customer ecosystem on a daily basis, this theme keeps coming up about community and creating belonging. And when I think about my lifelong passion, storytelling is really a true North Star for me. I always loved to read books. Even as a child, I was fascinated with other people's stories. And growing up, I used to write plays and cast my cousins in them. And
Oh, I love
I,
that.
yes, I was the editor of my high school newspaper. I've done market research. What I find is stories like what you're doing here with your podcast are what connect us. Stories are what help us find meaning, find connection, and really celebrate our traditions and our heritage. And I find that we're all trying to reconnect with that in meaningful ways. And that's what excites me about Success from Anywhere, the opportunity to create a community, to
I love
really
that.
come together and think about, how do we rework work? How do we make it possible together for people to live well and to work well? Because I don't know about you, but what I hear and experience showing up around me every day is people are no longer willing to choose one at the cost of the other. And what Success from Anywhere shares is how to play a new game of work and life, and to rediscover and reconnect with that understanding that there's always more than one way to win, that choice is always on and always available to us.
I love that. And I think the title of the book alone, Success from Anywhere, really tells it all, that you you really determine your success in so many ways. And of course, there are going to be challenges and potentially people and other things that stand in your way. But when we think about success from anywhere, especially from the context of this third office, which you describe as being the coffee shop or the WeWork or the library that you work out of, I really resonate with that because work has been totally redefined and the workplace has been redefined. Can you walk us through a little bit how companies are reworking work and the right way to do that in this environment?
I created something called the 4 Ws, and it's really a framework to help people take this big umbrella concept of the future of work and do the doable by
Mm,
breaking it down into some parts for discovery. So the first W is work. I mean, how is the work in your organization or your team, or for you, if you are an entrepreneur or an individual contributor, changing? I mean, for just about every organization and individual I know, the nature of the work itself has shifted over the course
mm.
of the past couple of years. And then how is that work shift aligned to outcomes? And is everyone clear on the outcomes that are linked to that work? After thinking about the work, I think about the workforce. Who needs to be doing this work? Is it, full time? Is it part-time people? Is it contractors? Can you adopt an Uber style model? Uh, Also, what are the skills this workforce needs to be successful? And I think critically important and coming to the top of the list right now, what are the highest aspirations of your workforce? And then after thinking about work and workforce, I think about workplace. Where and when does this work need to happen? When we come together in person, how do we commit to gathering with a purpose? Why are we there if we need to physically gather? And what are we going to do that's different when we come together? How much of work can be asynchronous? And after work, workforce, and workplace, I think about workflow. The workflow that happens when two people can stand up and talk to each other across the aisle is different when people are in different places and working in different times. So, what is the workflow that you need to help support the shifts in your work, your workforce, and your workplace? And what I'm finding is the organizations who are forging a path forward in a way that people are able to live well and work well and be their best selves at work and therefore their highest contributors are really looking in the direction of creating choices and thinking about those choices as pilots. What can we try? What can we discover? What else could this be?
Super interesting. I was starting to have my, really the wheels started to turn, I should say, when you were talking about that, and specifically from two perspectives. One, which is that in these environments that are like fully remote. So in my company, we are remote first, fully remote. No office exists today. And having those water cooler moments, having an attention placed on this workflow piece, especially, and creating those moments for just radical candor maybe and connection and things that we potentially took for granted when we had a physical workplace that was the norm to go to every single day, let's say. And then on top of that, I guess it's really like two and a half things. A branch off of that idea is, really thinking about the use of time and meetings and where we're spending our time with one another. There's a lot of discussion around whether meetings are highly effective or not, and the types of meetings that are more effective than others. And then the second full point for me is on the 4-day work week. And for just the what feels super progressive today and how businesses will continue to adapt to employee demands and expectations around what work should look like and what it should feel like. And to come to this point on the 4-day work week, I actually have a specific question for you because I read today that there was a business. I think the person is the CEO of this business in France. The company is LDLC, I believe. And he recently rolled out a 4-day work week without impacting employee salaries. So everything stayed the same with the exception of the amount of days that the employees were expected to work. And it was also a normal, like, 40-hour work week, with, I think, within the 4 days. And the business saw a 40% increase in turnover, which, for anyone listening, that's really an increase in profitability, let's say in revenue, whatever the business context is. And so this was a headline that I read. I didn't have an opportunity to really dig in, but from your perspective, especially working for some major companies, currently working for Salesforce, what are some of your thoughts on this continuous change in how we work and what the workforce and workplace and workflow and all of those things look like?
Well, first of all, meetings are a poor patch for a broken workflow.
Mm,
So, what happens is when we have unclear expectations and when we have a workflow that doesn't support asynchronous work or how we might wish to work now, that's when we experience that scope creep in meetings and this need to, be in person. And I like to step back and ask, what might we be missing?
mm,
Right? What could we enable that would make it possible for us to come together with a meeting that has a purpose? Maybe we're making a decision that's critical. Maybe we've just had something go live and we need to be together to support customers. Maybe there's a customer escalation. Those are great examples of understanding that there's a purpose for us to be together in the same place, even if that place is virtual, at the same time with a dedicated agenda and each person on the call understanding their role within it.
mm,
What I see leading organizations doing is looking in the direction of agency, looking in the direction of choice and trust. Because when we have clear outcomes that we're expected to deliver and each person is clear on those, where and when work happens becomes less of a factor. What gets emphasized is delivering the outcome,
right.
doing your best work in your best work style with whoever else you might need to collaborate with in order to realize that outcome. So often, though, what happens is unstated expectations always go unmet. And sometimes people aren't clear about the outcome they're supposed to be delivering. And again, this leads to the scope creep of more meetings and extra hours and that unhealthy feeling of sustained uncertainty.
Mm,
One of my favorite examples of an organization that's looking in this direction of choice and helping their employees tap into their own resilience is, believe it or not, General Mills. Now,
mm.
you might recognize this as the company we were all, unkind to people in supermarkets to get these products during the pandemic, right?
Yes.
These are the people making flour and cereal so that we could all apparently compete on the great British baking show together. And the well intentioned leaders there listened to their employees and they heard, in not surprising news, a high degree of burnout. And in their well intentioned way to address that burnout, they rolled out extra PTO, some extra time off. And they were shocked when fewer than 8% of their employees took advantage of this benefit.
Mm,
And so they stepped away and decided to get curious and ask that powerful question, what might we be missing? So they launched a deep employee listening campaign. And then they followed that up with work with a company that studies and specializes in neuroscience. Understanding what lights up that motivation center in our brain, what helps us navigate burnout and tap into our own resilience. As a result, they returned to their same employees and said, you're burnt out. You're
mm,
working a lot. We hear you. And that's why we want to offer you the Gift of Choice program. Now, within the Gift of Choice program, you'll have three choices. Choice one, more PTO. Choice two, more pay, so actual cash.
mm,
Choice three, donation to a not for profit of your choosing. Now, they knew they were onto something when within 24 hours, 85% of their employees had opted into the Gift of Choice program. So already we've improved from 8% to 85%.
right.
What's most shocking is their number one choice of the employees. What do you believe it was? More PTO, more pay, or the donation to a not for profit of your choice?
My gut would say the pay, but I feel like this is exactly why you're asking the question. So I'm going to go with number three, which is the not for profit of your choice.
Well, if this were baseball, 3 strikes, you're out. It's more PTO. That's
Oh,
why this story is so mind-blowing. General Mills, the
wow.
employer, got to the outcome they were willing to offer. All they did was change and give a choice.
Wow.
We all want the freedom to choose. And here's what shows up for me. What might change in our organizations if employers offered employees choices they viewed as favorable that the employer was willing to live with, like a 4-day work week, or like unlimited PTO, or like asynchronous work, or a shared workspace that's partially subsidized? What would happen if we offered choice? Because, see, they got to the exact same outcome.
Right.
And what they tapped into was meaning instead of mandates.
Mm.
That's so powerful.
That is so powerful. I can't wait for this episode to be published so everyone can realize the power in choice. And actually, when we think about our own experiences, who doesn't want to have the opportunity to have self determination and to really decide what their lives can look like comprehensively, not only in their personal lives, but also in their professional?
It might surprise you to discover that professionals and picky eaters have have that in common as well, that notion of choice. There are two women that started a wildly popular podcast and community, and the challenge they were trying to address is they're both working mothers with small children, and how do you get a meal on the table for the adults and the children and
Mm.
not perpetually be in this battle of you have to eat this, you don't finish the plate, there's no dessert, there's no video viewing, whatever, the punishment is that goes with
Right.
not eating the food. And these two women started a wildly popular podcast and community called Didn't I Just Feed You? And the entire genesis of all the recipes they offer, it's based on choice. Dinner is like two platters, and you can mix and match something that ends up as chicken and waffles or a Cobb salad. And what happens is the picky eaters, usually the little kids, but not always, responded to having a choice. And when they had a choice, they were more likely to eat, and then there's less hassle. And I think, isn't that funny? Picky
So
eaters and
fun.
professionals have something in common, but so do all people really on planet
Yeah.
Earth, which is we would prefer to have a series of positive choices where we are trusted to make the best choice for us.
I love that. It really is very harmonious with the idea of really wanting autonomy and wanting to be able to have flexibility. I mean, that is what COVID has really taught us, is that realistically, I would say people just want to be able to decide what their day to day looks like. I am connected with someone, Brad Fetterman. He's actually been a guest on this podcast, and he is my first repeat guest. And he, in one of his books, he writes about accountability versus ownership, and that accountability is driven by consequences, and that there is this sense of, when you're driving accountability, that there's going to be something on the back end of that that could be good or bad. There's some sort of consequence. But when you have ownership, you have an individual really taking the lead on, again, agency over what it is that they are owning. And so, whether we're a little kid being picky over our dinners, or an adult in our careers wanting to have agency over whether we're working 4 days a week or whether we're working 5 days a week in an office, it's that flexibility and self-determination that goes so far. One of the things that really stuck with me from our initial conversation was that you said being human is good for business. And naturally, for me, as you mentioned before, we have these similar passions, but for me, that goes a very long way, because I wholeheartedly agree. From your perspective and your career experience, why is being human good for business?
Most of us have probably received a corporate gift or swag in the past, but how many of those did you actually end up keeping? Probably not that many. That's why you need to check out swag.com for your company. It's the best place to buy custom gifts and swag that people actually want to keep. If you listened to last week's episode, then you know all about my love for swag.com, not only because I've received their swag on multiple occasions, but also because we use them in my full-time job, and it makes things so easy. You guys know I work fully remotely. Our company is fully remote, and so being able to reward and recognize and appreciate our employees without needing to maintain like a warehouse and all of our swag through that warehouse, right? Like you think about all of the administrative burdens that come with having swag for your employees. We don't have to deal with that because we leverage and use swag.com. So I'm just so glad that we get to partner with swag.com on the podcast because I really believe in what they do. Swag.com carries premium brands like the North Face, Yeti, Nike, and more. And it's all customizable with your company's logo and artwork. And let me tell you, the customization is amazing. You can really have everything customized the way that you want. And you can even create custom swag boxes full of great branded items, all delivered in a fully unique box. With swag.com, you can store your swag at their warehouse and ship to individual addresses or send in bulk to a single location and easily manage it from their free-to-use online portal. To give you an example, we're actually doing something fun at my full-time job where we're sending everyone that has an animal, a pet, something special thanks to swag.com, and we're able to do that in bulk. So it's honestly so nice and convenient that we don't have to manage each individual item and that we just store everything in swag.com warehousing. It allows us to just send those fun things to each person in bulk rather than printing out labels and boxing up items for each person. Swag.com takes care of it for us. So go to swag.com today for the perfect swag and custom gifts for your company. Right now, I have a special offer to help you get started. So you can get 10% off your order, but only when you go to swag.com/humanhr and enter promo code humanhr10. Remember, to get 10% off, go to swag.com/humanhr and use promo code humanhr10.
We've reached a major inflection point. Everything you just said summarizes how people are feeling, which is what we expect from companies and what we expect from work has shifted significantly during the pandemic. The big inflection point we've reached is moving from companies as command and control to companies as communities. And I want to bring you back to that word that you just said, ownership. When you think about a community, what is a community really? It's a place where you feel a sense of ownership. A community is a place where you experience freedom. A community is a place where you identify with a sense of belonging. A community is a human place that I like to think of as a kaleidoscope. I mean, if you think about a kaleidoscope, right, looking through that lens and turning it, I mean, there's one overarching shape, right? Usually a circle. And it's comprised of many brilliant individual pieces working together that as circumstances move, as a catalyst, usually your hand with a kaleidoscope, forces that shift, the whole may move and the integrity of the individual shapes is just as brilliant and maintained. That's what being human is good for business means. The moments that are real, the moments when we connect, the moments when we feel we are doing our best work are when we feel a sense of community and belonging to a whole where our individual identity is brilliant and we see how we're part of a bigger moving landscape. That doesn't happen in an operations review with a spreadsheet. That doesn't happen when we're mandating to people to come to a certain place at a certain time, to dress a certain way and say a certain thing. That comes from that freedom of expression. That comes from feeling a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, a sense of meaning, and knowing why we're doing what we're doing. And the Edelman Trust Index is something that's published every single year. And this organization studies what are the entities that we as humans most trust. And it's fascinating because during the pandemic, for the first time, the most trusted entity in the United States is our corporations and organizations where we work. It has surpassed church and government.
Wow.
We are looking for work to do and to be something for us that it's never been before. And we're looking for the future of work to be human.
Wow. There's a lot to unpack there, actually, and I'm thinking so much about the outreach that I get in my DMs and messages from listeners, and I get a multitude of things that I think that you would really be able to help us all navigate. One of the things that I often receive and questions on is really, well, okay, if we focus so much on people, how do we know that there's going to be a return on that investment? How do we know what's the business case? How are we going to drive the profitability? Now obviously, I have my answers for that because I fully believe that HR is not a cost center, for example, and that people operations is actually a revenue driver. If you focus on the people, the business will come along with it. But what do you say to potentially to colleagues or to people who ask that question around when you specifically when you're investing and whatever that means, whether it's financial benefits, total rewards, whatever that looks like, when you're investing in people, how do you know for sure that there's going to be a return and it's not going to be, more of a cost than a revenue driver?
Well, if your heart doesn't capture you, perhaps your head will. And that's why I look in the direction of a 1% daily improvement will more than double your impact in 72 days. And so, if you want to go with a consulting style, matrix managed measurement, imagine if every single person in your organization performed 1% better every single day. And each human in your organization then 72 days later was twice as good as they were at the beginning. What might that change for your organization? How could you crush your competition? What innovation might you unlock? How might you become the best place to work and attract the top talent?
Perfect answer. I also get the question from people who are like more so new in their roles, especially who really try and understand who owns this. And I always say on the podcast that everyone owns culture. Culture is created and destroyed by everyone. And similarly, I think when we think about creating that sense of ownership, a lot of that, I'm sure that listeners are going to think, oh, well, that's super top down. It's the executives, it's the leaders who are going to give us the autonomy and trust that we're going to be able to, take this agency and run with it. But do you agree with that? Or do you think that every single employee has an opportunity to drive their own agency and autonomy in this way?
Success and transformation come from the inside out. And organizations win when people see a new game is possible inside of an organization. Why wait for permission to try something? Why not run your own miniature pilot? If that's setting some new work hours for yourself and piloting that for 21 days and then sharing it with your boss, the new results you delivered, why not? We so often wait for permission. We wait for there to be this mandate or someone to give us an okay to do what we intuitively know might work or might work best for us. Why not try it and then go back with your discovery? I
Hmm.
mean, be the leader. The other critically important factor that shows up in what you said is the importance of values. And I want to differentiate that there's a difference between values and valued with a
Hmm.
D. So, values says, I'm clear about what my top value or values are and how they show up in my everyday life. One of the biggest sources of burnout and also employee churn is living outside of your values for an extended period of time. I mean, if your values of the organization where you work, the stated values, do not match your lived experience, you're living outside of your values for an extended period of time.
Hmm.
If your personal values do not align with the values of your organization, you will not feel a fit there and do your best work Valued is I feel seen and heard. I feel that what I'm doing matters. Not only do I see a purpose in my work, when I'm contributing something of value to this community, to this company, to this team, that value that I'm offering is met with something in return that I value.
Super interesting. I think that this is a good point to really break down the difference between those two, and actually coming back to your suggestion to really not wait to ask for permission, for example, and to really just try something. I know from so many of the listeners reaching out that there's this sense of fear, and I can definitely, relate to that from when I think about early on in my career where I really felt like I needed to always have permission, not just because I didn't, I was new in my role and I needed to make sure I was doing the right thing, but also because I was so afraid that I was going to get in trouble. And that's I am a self declared rule follower, but I also challenge the status quo. And so I've really tried to promote on this podcast for the listeners to really think outside of the box and not be afraid to color outside of the box too. And sometimes it's okay to do something that isn't seen as the norm or that does push the envelope and potentially have to explain it later on. Or if you feel more comfortable, to say to your leader, "Hey, I'm looking to try something new. I want to measure your level of comfort with this. And I really hope that, you can appreciate that this is something that is going to feel really exciting for me because I just like to try new things." And so maybe it's a matter of how you phrase it rather than asking for permission. It's asking for their blessing or asking for their point of view. And actually, this comes to a one of the points that I've made before on the podcast too, that we create what we experience for ourselves in the workplace. And I've shared on the podcast too that I've been in bad situations with bad leadership. And so this point of living outside of your values is totally going to hit home, I think, for the audience. But there is a sense of agency and ownership too in creating what you want and what you want outside of your workplace, but specifically what you want from a culture, what you want from your experience at work. We have um, a lot more influence on what that is, I think, than we probably realize. And when you put yourself in the change maker position and you're like, yeah, I want to go for this. This is what I want to experience. You feel so good about it when it actually works, or when people look to you to challenge the status quo and are influenced themselves. Would you agree?
I hear you. Fear keeps us stuck. And when we are living in fear, what happens is we struggle to create choices. We struggle to see how to get unstuck from that fear because it becomes consuming. And I've found there are a couple questions to help open up the conversation with myself to get curious and then have a conversation with a colleague or a boss looking in the direction of choices. And there are three questions I like to ask. What's working? I mean, even in our most stuck and afraid moments with horrible bosses and, difficult return to work mandates or whatever is showing up in your world, ask yourself what's working for you and in the context in which you are operating. Second, what's not working? Even if it's a long list, list it all or list the top ones that are problematic. And then ask, what's the smallest thing I could give myself permission to adjust? And I think about this in terms of 5-minute increments. If it's, I want to go to the 4-day work week and I think my boss will refuse that, could I have a conversation with my boss and say, I'm trying to create some space to show up at my best? And here's what I see as possible. For 30 minutes, Monday through Friday, I'm going to block a lunch and take it. The second option is I will conclude doing all meetings on Fridays by noon so that I have heads down time. The third option is I'll do a 4-day work week. What do you see as possible? And this puts us in the direction of do the doable, right? Get a small yes, build momentum, offer choices to your boss, and invite your boss to come up with choices as well. The reason I'm asking you for this is I'm attending so many meetings, I can't do my best work, the work that's valued here that helps us sell more or achieve more or whatever that looks like for your objectives. What do you see as possible? Ask your boss those same questions. What do you see as working? What's not working? What's the smallest thing we could give ourselves permission to adjust together? I mean, the way you get unstuck is one breath at a time, one step at a time, and one choice at a time. We often default to, and I get this way too when I'm in this fear loop, is I'm picturing the grand gesture. Now I don't just need to end work Friday at 5. I need a sabbatical, right? I need
Yeah.
a 3-week vacation. I don't just need a night where I don't do email. I need a month where I don't,
Right.
don't do email. We default to the grand gesture when we feel so stuck, and that's not doable,
Right.
right? We don't always have to rip off the Band-Aid. What we're looking for is momentum. One small choice, one small change that helps us get unstuck. Do the doable, right? It doesn't have to be, I go to the 4-day work week or I quit.
Right.
Build some stopping off points in there, because the bigger the outcome or the big conversation you're picturing, the longer you'll put it off and stay stuck in that fear.
This is great advice. And I really like what you said about it's not like an all or nothing. It doesn't have to be 4-day work week or I quit. And I would say that for anyone in this situation, feeling a bit pigeonholed where it's either this or I leave, you're putting so much pressure on yourself to get this potentially lofty outcome and answer when your manager might not have ever been asked this before. And there's a lot for them to unpack too, and for them to understand. And we know that there's always this conversation on, being fair and consistent. And I think that businesses are starting to break that down too, because not everything is going to be consistent, but if it can be equitable, then that means that there's opportunity for each individual to have that same access. So if the 4-day work week is their choice, then they have access to having that 4-day work week. But the equitable option is that not everyone needs a 4-day work week. Some people want to be in the office 3 days a week and remote 2 days a week and work fewer hours within that 5-day work week. And that's equitable for them because, again, they have the access and the opportunity. So I guess to close us out and to really, keep you in the hot seat only for a few more moments, and I'll finally and officially take you out of the hot seat. What predictions do you have for employers who do take on this approach of actively giving employees choice and agency over their day to day? And what's your prediction for companies that don't?
Choice is what moves us from limited to limitless. Choice. And what happens is when we settle for mandates, we are forcing people to live in a state of progressive tolerance, where people inside of your culture walk around saying things like, it's not that bad, it'll never change. You can't fight City Hall, but grass isn't always greener.
Mm.
And that state of progressive tolerance is a passive experience where people are just tolerating and not giving you their full attention. It's the equivalent of quitting on the job, and it's very difficult to shift a culture and get your best outcomes. What we're looking for is progressive consciousness, where we are living in active awareness about this community that we're living in. If a piece of trash blows into my front yard right now while I'm talking to you, I mean, the wind moved it there, and yes, someone else in the neighborhood clearly dropped it. If I don't go pick it up, I mean, am I contributing to making the culture a better place of the community in which I live? The reality is, when we are seen and heard, when we are trusted to do what we've been hired to do, we perform better. So my prediction is organizations that lean into choice are the ones that move from limited to limitless, and organizations that focus on creating values alignment and valuing the people who work for them are the ones that will attract and retain the best talent and will grow exponentially, as well as becoming the most innovative companies.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule. Where can we connect? Where can we buy your book? I will link it all.
Well, there's an exciting Success from Anywhere show, and you can subscribe to my channel on YouTube. I also regularly share new content and feature people who are leading breakthrough ideas and change on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And you can find the books at Amazon or your favorite online retailer.
Amazing. Well, thank you.
And soon to be FedEx stores, by the way.
Oh, well, that's a fun new thing.
Isn't that exciting? Yes.
Yeah, I love that. So then you can order it from a FedEx store and pick it up there. And
Yes. And if you're going in to ship something, return your Amazon package, you'll be able to buy the book in the store, and same with Hudson News at the airport.
Wow. Oh, Hudson News. That's my favorite. There are no budgets at the airport, so I love to go into a Hudson News. Oh my gosh. Well, I'll actually be in the airport in a few weeks, so if I see it, I will take a picture and I will send it to you. Well, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Karen. I really appreciate it, and I'm so excited for everyone to hear this.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to visit. And what I would leave you with is hard is a habit and easier is a choice.